Welcome to Unsung Seattle, stories about the Seattle scene in the 90s. Hey, what's up, brother?
Hey, Richard, good morning over here.
Yeah, good evening over here. How you doing?
Oh, just fine. And you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm
Good, brother.
Sitting around at
Well,
home, doing nothing.
excellent.
Yep.
Well, well, cool. So, yeah, if you wanted to get cracking, we could get right back to where we were
Sure.
at, I believe.
Just gonna make a little bit of a sound check here. It looks all right, so.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about your background, and we kind of got cut off when you were getting into talking about Andy Wood and his death and all of that.
I think that's okay. I think before that is still a little bit more ground to gain.
Yeah.
Because I think the Andy Wood is it's so overlooked, of course, and so important.
Yeah.
And so, sorry if I keep reverting back to Andy,
No problem.
okay. So anyhow, I think that the death of Andy, like I said the other day, spawned the life of so many other bands, especially Chris and Layne, of course.
Yeah.
And so Chris's energy, as you know, Chris was with Susan Silver, who he was married to, who was also the owner of Alice in Chains and a few other groups.
Yeah.
Anyhow, Chris was really pushing for Pearl Jam to become something, because the leftover love he had for Andy, I don't think he had any other way to route it into the universe or whatever. But
Yeah.
so I think he used that energy and as medicine for himself. He indefinitely pushed Eddie as hard as you could imagine. You know? And Eddie obviously needed that support, so Chris was just perfect for as you seen, putting Eddie on his shoulders or whatever it took to pump Andy up. And Jeff and Stone as well, you know. Chris would just give him the look, and they'd lift their heads up and start plucking chords. You know, it just was it was almost like Chris was sharing the energy that Andy shared with him to the band. You know.
Okay.
So yeah. So the Mookie Blaylock tour kind of really got started after the Moore Theater show and of Alice in Chains and Mookie Blaylock back in I believe it was 91 or something. Was that sound correct to you? 91 or 90? 90?
It should be probably 90.
90, you're correct. You're correct. Okay, so you're correct because I wasn't quite 21 yet, because we were on a bar tour, so I remember specifically not being 21. So you're correct.
That's gotta suck.
Yeah, well, no, not really. You know, it has its perks, believe me.
Oh yeah.
But anyhow, yeah, the Mookie Blaylock tour, the first leg of it, realistically, started in Victoria, Canada, at a place called the Landing Zone. It was a small bar, very small bar, like maybe 150 capacity, maybe.
Oh yeah.
You know? And yeah, getting up to the show though was quite an ordeal. Coming from Seattle on two tour vans which consist of 12 capacity, you know, small vans.
Yeah.
And Pearl Jam or Mookie Blaylock and Alice and the crew, which was us, rode in two separate vans, and we took a Ryder truck, I think, for all of our gear. And we proceeded to go to Canada. I was sharing the van with Layne, and I believe Jeff was in there. Mr. Arment was up front, and miscellaneous crew of PJ and Alice in Chains mixed.
Oh yeah.
But I remember sitting behind Layne specifically because we sat in the back of the van, and he was pretty worried about crossing the border, getting into Canada, because he thought he had warrants with the law. Okay. So yeah, he was pretty tripped out. I remember he was very paranoid, and I think even our crew truck with all the gear in it got stopped and searched at the border but of course we made it through to Canada safely. From that point, we went and got on a ferry, which is as you know, a boat that crosses the water. In Victoria, and we arrived in Victoria from Vancouver on a ferry boat with the crew, and like I said, we did the landing zone that night. And it was a pretty great show because for me, I lived with the band. I lived on top of Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, and I heard everything they did. I thought, but all of a sudden, from Magic, they pull out this song. The first time they ever played Rooster on a live set with sound, because obviously we do their sound.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they did that for sound check at the landing zone, and I remember it floored me. Fuck, dude, I never heard it, and it floored me. It absolutely. Now check this out. There was only probably 6 people in the bar that we were doing sound check after we had set up all the gear, and I was finishing the barricading, which went near the front stage. And Layne came out in his glasses, his sunglasses, his Jim Morrison look, and he comes out and they just fucking nailed it like the first time, and I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I was hanging lights. I was literally on a ladder hanging lights, and I was stunned. I had to get down, and the feeling was just so profound of Rooster on a loud system. It was paralyzing. The awe, the magic, the pure emotion, the raw emotion, because this is the first time ever. And then,
wow, did they play it live then at the show? Or?
Well, they didn't. They did not, because it was for the next album to be. Okay. We were just on facelift. We were just doing facelift stuff, and Rooster was definitely not on that set list.
No.
That's why it fucking floored me, man. Because I live in the rehearsal studio, and I never heard. But I did hear Jerry, because Jerry came into the warehouse office a couple of times to ask me and Tony Taylor, who was one of the other crew members as I was, who really, we were nothing in music. Jerry came and asked us what we thought of this guitar lick. And he literally did the Rooster guitar lick, and he was sitting Indian style on a beer stained carpet. Imagine a brown carpet with giant beer stains everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And Jerry had on his a little hat. What do you call it? A little, to keep warm in the winter. A little knitted hat.
Oh yeah.
And he was just with the guitar, no amplifier, his electric guitar, and he played just the little chorus from Rooster, and of course we said, hey, that sounds great, but we really were just the housekeepers there. But as far as music goes, I thought it was. Yeah. But hearing it live was like, wow, a whole nother. It was just pure magic, and to watch the band start to curve in this direction was interesting. So. So that was the first leg of Mookie Blaylock, and to be honest, the Mookie set was I mean, this is terrible, but it wasn't even memorable. I'm sorry for PJ fans, but the early Eddie, I mean, this was the second show was in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And that night, the night of Vancouver, is the night I shared the room with Eddie, as the story I told you.
Yeah, you have to get into that story later.
Yeah, sure. But just letting you know that the next club we played was the Town Pump in Vancouver, which I've sent you a few pictures from, of course. Yeah. And it was extremely memorable for PJ especially.
Is that the one that's in PJ 20, the movie?
It was referred to in there by Kevin, or by Mr. Shoss, Kevin. Yeah. Kevin being an old crew member from NAF and from PJ and from Alice from Soundgarden. Yeah. So they referred to the awakening of Eddie, kind of, which I totally agree on. I don't really know why it happened, but I think he grew up a lot that night. He got the life almost choked out of him too. It was quite an eye-opener for Eddie being on the road,
I remember you told me they got booed in Canada.
Actually, yeah, they did. So the first time, excuse me, not to backtrack, the first time they were booed was at the Moore Theater in '91. But mind you, on the flyers for advertisement, they said with special guest from Mother Love Bone.
Yeah.
So I think people were really expecting Mother Love Bone because of the way they announced it, you know.
Oh yeah.
And not many people knew of Andy's death because, of course, we didn't have internet like we do now, and all the you know, so nobody knew, and they were quite blown away to come up and hear this band that you couldn't even understand what they were saying on stage. You know, they weren't real legible, honestly, in the beginning. I think the only words I could remember is "I'm Still Alive" from one song, and I was behind the monitor, so I should be able to hear what they're saying. But of course, it was pretty bad. I gotta admit, it was fun.
Okay.
But hey, you know, the blooming of beautiful flowers all start from shit. I mean, from what I understand, it takes shit to make beautiful flowers. So, so no, really, the night of Vancouver was pretty memorable. Just not to mention the mixture of people we had as crew and band members. It was, for me, pretty colorful and you know, pretty memorable. Did you want to break into some of the show stuff from that night, or you,
sure.
Of course, we'll save the Eddie bad story for after the show. Well, during the show, we always set up sound and our staging and our gear, and then we check it with the bands, you know.
Yep.
They come up and they do their check, and normally we have lunch break right after that, and we have a couple hours to kill sometimes. So the day of the Vancouver show, Vancouver, Canada, after sound check, me and Layne asked me to go take a hike with him, which was usually our cue for get away from everybody and go take a walk.
Okay.
So we went and walked around Vancouver, in downtown Vancouver. I remember they had a lot of pigeons on the telephone lines. You want to watch out for the pigeons. As you can imagine. So I was wearing a trench coat with underwear underneath just to amuse the Canadians. I mean, silly. But Layne, I remember we went into the downtown McDonald's, and the band King's X was sitting down eating.
Oh, yeah.
I still don't really know their music or know who they are, but I remember how happy they were to see Layne there. Oh, yeah. I think the singer was wearing a leather fringe jacket, right, with the leather hanging off it. Yeah. And I remember he stood up to give Layne a hug, and you know, Layne was cordial with him, and it seemed like they knew him, but you know, like everywhere we went, of course, that was the deal. But interesting running into them, and from that point, I got a really cool story. From the McDonald's that was so busy, we decided to go, me and Layne decided to make a move to down the road because it was packed in the McDonald's, right? Yeah. So we went into an older mom and pop shop, A&W Root Beer, I believe it was, in downtown. And me and Layne, there was nobody else in there, so we stopped in, and they had a little TV set playing inside. Yeah. So I remember Layne ordered onion rings and root beer, and I forget what I ordered. But,
I fucking hate root beer.
Well, you know, to each their own. I guess you've never ate at an A&W when you were a kid. It's an American thing, you know. I mean, but anyhow, so the night, so there's a small TV set playing and literally we're about an hour before showtime. So Layne and I were grabbing a bite to eat. And on the television was the Music Awards. It must have been the Canadian Music Awards. Really? Okay. I didn't know there was such a thing, but of course I'm sure there is. And check this out, man. Man in the Box was up for best rock video, right?
Yep.
But guess who it was up against?
I know because you told me, but tell.
Oh, I told you, but if I didn't tell you, you would never guess, right?
No.
Okay, so as you know, it was up against Bart Simpson, the Bartman, right? And lo and behold, the Bartman won, and Layne was fucking pissed off, man. He was like, he was livid. I've never seen him really get a riser like that, you know. So I laughed at him, of course, because I thought it was funny, because before we had the discussion of not wanting to be a rock star, and now we have the discussion of, so a little bit, I just smiled because of the, the hypocritical nature of the situation. But
that's pretty hilarious stuff.
He said, Layne said, I can't fucking believe it. He goes, that's not a rock video. He goes, it's a fucking cartoon. It's not a rock video. And of course I laughed like you are, because it is funny. You know?
Yeah, it is.
So with that said, we went back to the town pump, and the show got on its way. And once again, the show started with Mookie Blaylock. And honestly, the crowd they weren't into it, because they were more of an Alice in Chains crew that I guess was expecting Mother Love Bone, because I remember the crowd scene from behind the stage where the monitors were, because that's where I was. I usually sit behind the drum kit, and if anyone comes up on stage, I'm the guy that helps them back into the crowd with a throw, usually. So during the show, Mookie played it set, and I remember thinking when Alice played, both nights in Victoria and Vancouver, I remember thinking how the crowd looked like an ocean of dreaded hair. You could literally walk on it like dreaded carpet. Imagine, Okay. And anyhow, I threw during the Alice in Chains set on the Vancouver show, I threw Dave Cruzen a couple times off of stage into the crowd, because he wanted me to throw him off stage so he could do a little flip or a little jump into the crowd.
Really? Dave Cruzen?
Yeah, Dave.
Wow.
Yeah, Dave. He was their original drummer. He's a really neat little. He's a really nice guy. Really cool dude. So
he wanted to do like a crowd surf or something?
Well, yeah, he would come up and tell me to throw him off the stage, because I was back there and so I'd grab him by the belt and by the, well, it must have been the shirt. I don't know how I grabbed it. I don't know how I threw him exactly, but I remember throwing him out at least 2 to 3 times, and him being excited by that.
That's cool.
But during the Alice set, Dave wanted to go out there and mosh, so that was pretty cool. Hey, he's probably the only guy I ever seen in the mosh pit, now that I think about it,
Yeah.
But so that night, as you know, that was a pretty neat night, because I think it really confirmed to me that Alice in Chains was solid in Canada too, because we can't watch TV and we don't know what's going on. And I mean, especially when you're working, imagine working 2 shows a day sometimes, but 7 days a week. So we had no time we were just permanent rock and roll, and that's all we were, nothing else, But so I never knew about anything media or what people thought about the band. So here's a band that I've been with since the beginning, or not the very beginning, but close, at least the facelift beginning and pre, and watching them watching other people love them as much as I loved them in my heart was very, it's almost like you have a relationship with the world that people understand the way you feel, through your music, of course.
So were the band surprised by the reaction, or?
Well, by Alice in Chains' reaction?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't surprised at all. I was more or less confirmed that, okay, well, I guess I like this music for a reason. Everyone likes it, Yeah. Kind of imagine never fitting in with the world, but then all of a sudden you see the world, a lot of people.
I remember it as a weird time. I mean, unemployment and all of that shit. And all of a sudden there were these guys that kind of spoke to you like they were on your side, so to speak.
Right, like superheroes, you know.
Yeah. So, you have this hilarious Eddie Vedder story from when your friend thought he broke into your room or something.
Oh no, well Eddie shared a room. Okay, so that was the night of the Vancouver show. We actually shared a room together because, okay, Mark Naff, who was our sound guy, who owned Naff, who was also the tour manager of the beginning leg of the event. Us three, Eddie, Mark, and I shared a room in like a guest house while the rest of the band stayed in a hotel on the other side of town. Oh. Our accommodations for, touring or whatever. Yeah. And some of the other guys from Pearl Jam or Mookie Blaylock were in the same house that Eddie, Mark, and I stayed in. And so Mark, he also was carrying the tour money for the events. Mm-hmm. And that night before we went to bed, he told me he had $10,000 in his pocket to be aware, But in the middle of the night, like I said, Eddie, Mark, and I shared a small room together. Yeah. 3 beds in one room, and we had like a sliding door that went out to the hallway and to the rest of the house. Mm-hmm. In the middle of the night, it was dark, and we were sleeping pretty heavy. I was sleeping on my chest, I remember specifically. And Eddie, I guess he must have awoke and was trying to leave the room, or trying to, and next thing you know, Mr. Naff had him pinned down to his bed with Mark on his chest and Mark's hands around his neck. And Mark's a pretty big dude. He's a very stout Persian, just very, very stout dude. He's got Eddie around the neck with both hands, and he's on top of him, and he's yelling to me to get up. And of course, I pushed myself from my chest and looked over at them in the dark, but I could clearly see what was going on, and I yelled to him, and he yelled to me, "Chay, get over here and fuck this guy up." And he said it twice, "Fuck this guy up, fuck this guy up." But each time he said, "Fuck this guy up," he had him by the neck, and all I could see was the poor little guy's hair flipping, and I knew he could break his neck. And I'm like,
poor Eddie.
And it freaked me out. Yeah, so I raised one hand. Mind you, I'm on my chest, and I raised one hand, and I yelled, Mark. I go, "It's Eddie." And he literally said, Eddie who, twice, and shaking his head. And I yelled, I couldn't remember his last name. I believe it was Mueller. I couldn't recall, but I just yelled, "It's Mookie Blaylock, Eddie." And Mark released his neck, and he's still on top of him. And Mark's like, "Oh my God." And Eddie's like, "Oh my God," on the ground, looking up with his arms crossed to block the next punches possibly coming. Yeah. And both of them, and Mark says to Eddie, he goes, "What were you doing?" And Eddie, of course, if you guys watch the video, you know Eddie's voice. He had kind of a Femi voice when the way he spoke was like, anyways, Eddie's getting choked. He's laying on his back. Mark says, "What were you doing, Eddie?" Eddie goes, I was going to the bathroom. and Mark goes, well, fucking go then. And Eddie put his arms up, and he goes, you scared me. So it's just it actually happened, shit like that happens on the road, because in the early days, you're I guess it was money, and
that is so funny.
Yeah, it was pretty funny, but honestly, that night is the night they talked about when he made that growth, when he made that, and then after that, I seen him at the OK Hotel when they were getting signed. I think a couple weeks later, or a month later, after the Vancouver shit.
Oh yeah.
the show up there, and I seen them at the OK Hotel in Seattle, and I think they were getting signed by their label.
Yep.
Or I think they just got signed by their label.
Okay.
And we did the sound for this event. I forget but it was at the OK Hotel, and and I remember going and seeing Eddie. Eddie was hanging off of the what do you call it, the fire pipes in there. And it wasn't very high off the ground. It was probably only 8 feet up, or probably only 6 feet off the ground. I remember I went out and grabbed his feet. No, I was swinging him as he was on it, and some girls came out and tried to stop me because they thought he would fall. And after the show, you know, I was talking to Eddie outside, and he said something to me, and I said, you scared me. And I think that's one of the last times I talked to Eddie
really?
a long time ago.
Cool.
Cool, brother Richard. Well, you take care over there, and enjoy the swordfish. I don't know what you guys eat over there. What the fuck you guys eat over there?
Swordfish?
Oh, yeah. Wait.
I'll let you know next time what we eat here.
They had a Nord joke, the Alice in Chains guys did. They'd always make fun of they'd say, there's this terrible fish. I don't know what it's called, but it must taste terrible, but it's a traditional dish.
Sour herring.
Lutefisk,
oh,
right?
Lutefisk, okay, okay.
Yeah, the Alice in Chains guys had a joke for a while. Did you eat the lutefisk? They always fucking... I never have tried lutefisk, but, you know, I remember this is like...
You don't want to try it, trust me.
Is it? I hope it's not as bad as the brown-eyed starfish. I
don't know, but we also have fermented herring. Can you imagine?
I think that's what it was. They were talking about fermented fish of some kind.
Yeah, that is good actually, but the lutefisk is disgusting.
Did you try the lutefish? All right, later, man. Have a good day.
Yeah, later.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.